Hi, I'm Clarence Gooden, Vice President of Network Operations.
And I'm Mike Cantrell, Vice President of Mechanical. And we're here today to ask for your help.
We strive to provide on-time rail service to our customers every day. Our trains transport customer products from point A to point B, and they do that with about 2,700 locomotives that run on diesel fuel. Fuel is one of our biggest operating expenses at CSX, and sometimes it's used needlessly. But there are ways to conserve it and not diminish the quality of service that we provide for our customers.
Our HPO processes have helped us identify best work practices. They've also enabled us to do our work more efficiently. We're better able to stay on plan and save time, energy, and resources. That's what we'd like to talk to you about today, fuel resources. A group of your co-workers from all around the property came together to talk about train handling techniques. Their goal was to come up with the best fuel practices from a fuel conservation standpoint. They looked at fueling as a team effort, all departments, all jobs, and decided what it would take to save time and money when it comes to running locomotives.
Any business wants and needs to run efficiently. CSX spends millions of dollars each year on fuel. The bottom line is that we all need to do our part to save on those fueling costs.
And don't forget the environmental aspects too. As a good community neighbor, CSX needs to do its part to prevent spills during fueling and to help keep our environment clean.
The video you're about to watch will help give you an idea of how you can help do your part in conserving fuel and preserving our environment.
We need everyone to come on board and do what they can for fuel conservation. We're counting on you.
If you drive a car, chances are pretty good you've been here to a filling station, because if you run out of gas, you're not going anywhere. Before you drive in, you probably check out signs like these. After all, if we've got to fill up, we want to be sure we're getting a good price. Fueling up your car or truck can really add up, and although many of us probably don't think about it, fueling locomotives adds up for CSX too. Take a look. Due to high fuel costs, CSX ran over plan every month in 1996 on fuel costs. By the end of the year, more than $307 million was spent on fuel. That was more than $52 million over plan. That's a lot of money and fuel. Here's another way to look at it. Every minute, CSX uses 804 gallons of fuel to run the railroad. That same 804 gallons could fill a car's tank full every week for 15 months. In 1 hour, CSX uses 48,240 gallons of fuel. Again, a car's tank could be filled with that same amount of fuel for 76 years. Fuel is one of the biggest operating expenses CSX has. As a team, we all need to be aware of what we can do to help conserve it. If we save money at the bottom line, that allows the company to be more competitive and financially strong, and that's good news for all of us. Conserving fuel also means being aware of spillage and making sure locomotives function properly. Keeping the environment we live and work in clean is important. Take care when you fuel up a locomotive that spillage does not take place. Make sure everyone understands the steps involved, and a thorough job briefing has been done before any work begins. The average Consus carries 10,000 gallons of fuel. It's easy to forget about it. Out of sight, out of mind. Part of what being a high-performance organization is all about is looking at the big picture, not only running trains, but looking at how we do it every day and making sure it's the best way we can do it. Many people shut off their car when they know they have a long wait ahead of them. Why? Because running their cars wastes gas.
That's right. And we engineers need to think that way about our locomotives too. If we're going to be stopped for 60 minutes or longer, shut it down. Otherwise, even at idle, fuel is being wasted. It only takes a few moments to shut down an engine.
Engineers, dispatchers, power managers, and yard masters play key roles in fuel conservation every day. Through good train handling techniques, a locomotive engineer has the ability and responsibility to conserve fuel on the line of road through throttle modulation and dynamic braking. Dispatchers have the responsibility to alert crews about other trains they may be meeting, or if a crew might be delayed for a time greater than 60 minutes. That information can help crews make good fuel conservation decisions. They may be able to ease up on the throttle or shut down some units.
CSX AC train dispatcher calling train Q44013, over.
CSX train Q44013, over.
Q44013, I'm going to be putting you in the siding at Braganza for 3 southbound trains. The first one will not be arriving for about an hour, over.
CSX Q44013, we understand, AC dispatcher. We'll be taking siding at Braganza for 3 southbound trains. And we understand it will be about an hour before the first train arrives. And also, AC dispatcher would like to report that CSX engine 5814 fuel monitor showing that we're down to only 1,000 gallons of fuel, over.
Okay, Q44013, AC train dispatcher understands that engine 5814 is down to approximately 1,000 gallons. I will report it to the power manager. CSX AC train dispatcher out.
Q44013 out.
Approaching Folkestone only has 1,000 gallons of fuel in his locomotive. Is that correct? It is. What was the next nearest road crossing that you can stop that train at, and I'll make arrangements to contact the fuel center in Tampa and have them...
Teamwork makes the difference. Communication between the crew, dispatcher, and power manager keeps trains running on schedule and from running out of fuel. Power managers are key in fuel conservation. Every day they have conference calls with yard masters, service managers, and train masters so that everyone involved is aware of each locomotive's service and fueling needs. During these calls, power managers have the responsibility to request that all locomotives not needed for service be shut down. Yard masters can help too by contacting crews that might have 60 minutes or longer to wait in a yard. That allows the crew to shut down locomotives and save fuel.
CSX Right Yard, A-Tower calling train Q44013, over.
CSX train Q44013, over.
Q44013, we're going to have to hold you out in excess of 60 minutes at Sweat Street, over.
CSX train Q44013, we understand, Yardmaster. We'll be held out in excess of 60 minutes at Sweat Street. We will be shutting down all trading locomotives, over.
That is correct. CSX Right Yard, A-Tower out.
This is the perfect opportunity for an engineer to save our company some fuel. I'm going to back off the throttle, use throttle modulation, and pace our train in the siding at Braganza. There's no need wasting valuable fuel if we're going to have to wait an hour for the first train.
Your train handling rules 2.3.1 also tell you when a locomotive should be shut down. For example, when yarding a train, or at the end of a tour, or if you're being relieved and the next engineer isn't yet available. Units not needed for movement should also be shut down, and keep in mind that if cars are set off, all of the power may not be needed to pull the train. When coming into a yard, isolate trailing units if tonnage permits. Unneeded power should be shut down. And if you have a wait 60 minutes or longer at a siding when meeting another train, shut down all but your lead unit. If the temperature is below 40 degrees, or if the time you'll be waiting is not long enough to shut down a unit, you can still conserve fuel by making sure the engine is at its lowest possible idle speed. Many engines can do that for you automatically, but to make sure, just center the reverse lever. Low idle can save barrels of fuel. How much fuel? At idle, older locomotives use 5 gallons per hour. A Dash 8 uses 3.4 gallons per hour, and at low idle, 2.7 gallons per hour. A consist of 3 Dash 8s at low idle will use a little over 8 gallons of fuel an hour. That adds up to a barrel of fuel every 5 hours. Low idle can help conserve fuel, and if units aren't needed for work, even more fuel can be saved by shutting down those unneeded units. If the temperature is 40 degrees or higher, there is no reason not to shut down units that don't need to work. When the temperature drops to 25 degrees or lower, you should do the following in order to prevent the freezing of locomotive components. Open the generator field switch, center the reverse lever, and then place the throttle in the number 3 position. This is the maintenance schedule that came with my truck. Regular maintenance, like keeping up with oil changes, will keep this truck running for years to come. Locomotives need that same type of care. Road locomotives must be serviced every 8 days. Like your car, that work is essential so that they'll keep running properly in the future. It's also a time when they'll be fueled up. Locomotives can be fueled a number of ways. Clifton Forge has a state-of-the-art mainline fueling area. It's a part of a strategic plan to better serve the equipment that keeps our railroad running. Fueling can also be done at a fixed facility like servicing centers, or by a CSX or vendor truck in a direct truck-to-locomotive fueling, or DTL. Just because a train pulls into a yard or center doesn't mean it needs to be fueled. If you pulled into a gas station every time you used a quarter of a tank of gas, you'd be wasting your time. It's the same for locomotives. Filling them up every time they come off the road is not best practice, unless, of course, the locomotive needs to be fueled. Fueling takes time, so if a locomotive doesn't require it, it shouldn't be done. It's much better instead to move that engine out of the yard quickly so it can move freight. A locomotive shouldn't run out of fuel. Your car lets you know when you need to fill up. Keep track of that with the locomotive, too. Some locomotives have been outfitted with AEI dynamic tags. These tags allowed trains to go by checkpoints and send back fuel information to a testing environment. Then it's automatically known how much fuel a locomotive has on board. If your car acts up or has a problem, it will usually let you know about it. Engineers and other crew members can help be sure that their equipment is functioning properly by watching for trouble signs. If a steady stream of white or dark smoke or white or dark puffs of smoke are seen, report them. Oil spray should also be noted. Your observations can help keep a handle on the harmful emissions that might pollute our air. And keep this in mind, acceleration and speed. When you step on the gas, you're asking your car to perform at a higher level. As a result, it will use more fuel. That goes for locomotives too. The higher the throttle position, the more fuel an engine uses. One way to conserve fuel is through throttle modulation. If you know you will have a delay coming up and throttle modulation can be used, do it. Ease up on the throttle and use less power. It can literally save hundreds of gallons of fuel over a run. Another effective way to conserve fuel is to use dynamic braking. Dynamic braking saves much more fuel than power or stretch braking. When power braking is used, it's like pulling extra cars in a train because you're using power and brakes at the same time. It wastes fuel. When I purchased my truck, I received information on how to use and what to expect from the equipment inside. Soon you'll receive the same type of information on best practices for fuel conservation. A team of your colleagues has already developed best practices on locomotive fuel handling techniques and locomotive fueling practices. With your support, these best practices can save our company upwards of 10% on our fuel budget. For example, one new HPO practice assigns accountability to yard masters to ensure that yard locomotives are fueled properly and do not run out of fuel. Other HPO teams will be looking at more ways to conserve fuel through other HPO processes, like ways to account for and purchase fuel, and seasonal and shutdown policies. And in the future, CSX will be working on new technology like onboard computers and wireless communication that will help make it even easier to conserve fuel. More and more locomotives may be outfitted with AEI dynamic tags in order to provide real-time fuel levels and to let power managers, train masters, yard masters, and others know how many miles remain before an engine needs to be fueled. Interactive efficiency testing will be implemented through multimedia learning centers. Also in the future, better fueling strategies will be developed for unscheduled trains. Each locomotive will have a fuel plan, whether it's regularly scheduled or not. For example, grain and coal trains. Finally, Locomotive swap-out plans will be developed so that yard and local engines can support the best fueling practices that will have already been implemented. We all know what needs to be done to keep our cars running right and how to save as much as possible when we fill up. Now the challenge is to think the same way when we're at work. It's possible to save fuel, thousands of barrels of it each day, through good train handling techniques like throttle modulation, dynamic braking, and using low idle whenever possible, by communicating with each other so that each person involved knows what lies ahead on a job or a run, and by shutting down locomotives that aren't needed or are standing still for 60 minutes or more. It's a big challenge, and conserving fuel requires a team effort, but together we can put the brakes on practices that cost us fuel. This fuel story doesn't end here. It begins with you.